Yesterday, President Trump proclaimed peace. Today, he warned of violence. Such is the precarious nature of the president's Middle Eastern peace deal. Here is the president earlier today when he was asked how long it will take for Hamas to disarm and if he was confident that will happen.
Well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. We have told them we want to disarm, and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. But they will disarm. Do you understand me?
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in an interview with my colleague Tony DeCopel, said Hamas must not only disarm, but that all weapons must be removed from Gaza, a precondition, he said, for new governance and reconstruction. So much, of course, has to happen first, and already complications. Israel is frustrated Hamas has not returned, as promised, the remains of all deceased hostages in Gaza. As a consequence, Israel cut by half planned deliveries of humanitarian supplies. Also, Hamas fighters have regained control of parts of Gaza City and have carried out violent reprisals. A Reuters dispatch confirmed a video circulating online of Hamas fighters killing 7 men in full public view. These developments have not extinguished hopes for peace. Israel's prime minister told CBS he believes prospects have never been better because, he said, long-standing enemies or rivals of Israel now know the only path forward is acceptance not only of Israel's right to exist, but recognition of its region-wide military clout, underscored, the prime minister said, by the vanquishing of militant or state-sponsored threats from Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. For more, I want to turn to Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Ed, good to see you. Good afternoon. The president said a lot about this situation today. What is the sense at the White House about how well this peace deal, infant as it is progressing?
Well, their view is that that we've gotten this far is a significant accomplishment, and he intends to see it through. That what you played earlier there, him suggesting that they would take the arms from Hamas one way or another, is a sign of sort of where this may be headed next. There's a real chance at stalemate here, that the two sides can't necessarily agree on how to do so, and it seems that is where the president is going to focus next, making sure that Hamas makes good on that. The fact that 4 more deceased hostages were shared today will be seen as an encouraging sign and one worth marking, as they have. But beyond that, the next few steps now are really going to test the Trump administration's patience and attention on this, and we'll see whether or not the president remains as deeply engaged as he clearly was in the last 10 days or so.
And the patience of the Israeli prime minister, also an enormous factor in all of these calculations. I want to play for you, Ed, and our audience, a part of Tony DeCopel's interview with the prime minister. Let's listen.
Mr. Trump says the war is over, but clearly the war is not over. The IDF is deployed to sections of Gaza still, and Hamas is still on the streets of Gaza. How can you say the war is over?
Well, we agreed to give peace a chance. We agreed that we should, the conditions in his 20-point plan are very clear. It's not only that we get the hostages out without getting our military out, but that we would subsequently have both demilitarization and disarmament. They're not the same thing. First, Hamas has to give up its arms. And second, you want to make sure that there are no weapons factories inside Gaza. There's no smuggling of weapons into Gaza. That's demilitarization. We agreed that that's part of the plan. And we also agreed, okay, let's get the first part done. And now let's give a chance to do the second part peacefully, which is my hope. But if not, I think I heard the president speak tonight. He said, listen, they better do it, or, how can I speak for him? He said, all hell breaks loose, okay? Well, I hope it doesn't. I hope we can do this peacefully, and we're certainly ready to do so.
All hell possibly breaking loose. That's been the status quo for nearly 2 years. So we're at this point where it feels like an overused term, but one nonetheless, an inflection point.
Yeah, and telling here that he, like the president, cites what the president had said there, that this has the potential to get a little more aggressive yet again, should Hamas not follow through with its vow to disarm. It's why we have been saying since that 20-point comprehensive plan was released here at the White House a few weeks ago that any number of those bullet points could take weeks, if not months, if not years, to fully negotiate out, that this wasn't going to be resolved quickly. And developments, today, and those comments from the Prime Minister, and as we see the rest of that interview, you get a sense that there is still great skepticism and concern about where this is headed next, even though there's great hope across that region that there ultimately will be some kind of a deal. But again, the question here at the White House will be, or that we'll be asking here at the White House is, to what level are Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, the Secretary of State, the President himself, still directly engaged in this and continuing to put pressure on these leaders to get to the full resolution at a time when, for example, today the President spent time with the President of Argentina. He's seeing, we expect Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine later this week, who's eager to get the President's attention back on the conflict with Russia. And there are a host of other domestic and international priorities that the President's going to have to worry about. He's getting ready to go to Asia in a few weeks. So to what extent can he still remain focused on the Middle East when all those other things that can pull in an American president will do so in the coming days?
Not to mention simmering and ever more bubbling trade tensions with China, which may also play out in that trip to Asia as well. Ed O'Keefe, as always, North Lawn of the White House, thank you so very much. Jon Alterman joins me now. He serves as the Zbigniew Brzezinski Chair in Global Security and Geostrategy for the Center for Strategic International Studies. That is a mouthful, so forgive me for taking the time to get that all read before I turn to you, John. Evaluate what you heard from the Israeli Prime Minister talking about the need to demilitarize Gaza, that he hopes it will happen, but quoting the President, all hell breaks loose if it does.
First, it looked to me like he was very satisfied with the deal he struck. He got a lot. He got all these hostages out. He didn't give up all the things that Hamas had been insisting on for a long time.
And there were parts of it that were in its development that the Israeli government persuaded the Trump White House to change.
And it was very favorable toward the Israelis. All the talk about Palestinian self-determination.
West Bank.
Very, very watered down. The reality is a lot of these things are really hard. As Ed O'Keefe suggested, the issue of disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. What do you do with guys who are in a militia to get them to no longer be in a militia and have them lead normal lives? That's a really complicated, complex process, all glossed over. Nobody thought, how are we going to do this? Who's going to do it? Who's going to take the weapons? All left, we'll have other people work it out.
To the point that I included in my open to the show, they killed 7 people on the streets of Gaza City today, Hamas militants, as if to show, A, we're here, B, we still have the guns, and C, we know how to use them, and D, intend to use them.
And we're
on anyone we suspect of not being on board.
And that was, I think, a very conscious decision. Hamas has been devastated. They probably lost about 2/3 of their fighters. They are desperate to show that they still have power. Of course, they're going to do that. The Israelis are also showing we have power. We can still do things. We can still withhold aid. We can kill people. And the Israelis did kill several people today. How much further we are, I think, partly depends on the president deciding he's going to stick with this. His negotiators are going to stick with it. There are other things going on. Zelensky's coming to Washington. He may be going to Asia. I think there are people in the Israeli government who say, I hope the president gets distracted. The president doesn't stick with this. There are people on the Muslim side, the Arab side, who said, the president told us he was going to be really engaged. We need him to be engaged. How that sorts out, if it doesn't meet people's expectations, does it complicate the president's legacy, his reputation? What does it mean for his ability to work? I don't know. All those things are left to the future, but an awful lot of things have been left to the future.
Yes,
the president said, we unstuck it. We got 20 hostages back. We'll work everything else later.
You and I have known each other a long time. You're a student of the region. One of the things that I keep hearing about this in the category of what's different, the White House and advocates for the president say what's different is there is buy-in from the regional Arab world and Muslim countries outside of the region to put in investment dollars, reconstruction dollars, and to pressurize Hamas that this only gets worse and you've got to get out. And if there's going to be any hope for the Palestinians and the diaspora, you've got to get out and we've got to get to the next stage of that. This idea that there will be regional buy-in and pressure that hadn't materialized before. Do you believe any of that's possible?
Yeah, but we're a ways away from that. I think what made this happen is both the Hamas side and the Israeli side said, this president has leverage, he can make our lives miserable, and he's willing to use it. But the underlying reality is this deal was made at a time when Palestinians are convinced that the Israeli government is genocidal, when Israelis are convinced that Hamas remains genocidal. Each side thinks the other side ultimately wants to kill them all or expel them all. And if you haven't gotten past that point, you don't have a peace deal.
Right. You have deep mistrust, distrust, fear, and all of those things at the most intimate human level, and every interaction complicate this deal as they've complicated every previous deal attempted.
But let's not miss the fact that an awful lot of innocent people are home. And that's a big accomplishment.
That's a huge accomplishment. Huge. And history will record it as such.
There's a long way to go.
Jon Alterman, thanks so much. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you, Major.